The morning air in Fort Bragg cut like a knife, sharp and unforgiving as the instructors who ruled this place with iron discipline. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen stood at attention on the firing line, her M4 carbine held with the casual confidence of someone who'd been born holding a weapon. Around her, 24 other candidates prepared for the qualification shoot that would determine who stayed and who went home. This wasn't just any marksmanship test. This was the crucible that separated the hopefuls from the elite, the dreamers from the operators. 600 meters downrange, small steel targets waited in the pre-dawn darkness, barely visible even through the most advanced optics. The wind howled across the North Carolina plains at 18 knots, gusting to 25, making the shot nearly impossible for even seasoned marksmen. Instructor Marcus Brennan watched the line with the cold assessment of a man who'd seen 1,000 candidates fail and felt nothing. He'd been running this program for 7 years, and in all that time, only a handful had impressed him. Staff Sergeant Chen, however, had become something of an irritation. She was too good, too consistent, too composed. Something about her rubbed him the wrong way, though he'd never admit it was simply that she challenged his assumptions about who belonged in special operations. "Candidates ready?" Brennan's voice carried across the range like a whip crack. "You have one shot, one opportunity to prove you belong here. The target is 600 meters, wind variable, light conditions poor. This is your final marksmanship evaluation. Miss, and you're done." Maya settled into her shooting position with practiced ease. Her breathing slowed automatically, her heart rate dropping as she entered the focused state that had kept her alive through 3 deployments in Afghanistan. Through her scope, the target appeared and disappeared with each gust of wind, a dancing phantom that demanded absolute precision. She could feel Brennan's eyes on her back, sense his expectation that she'd fail. He'd been looking for reasons to wash her out since day one, citing vague concerns about unit cohesion and team dynamics. Never anything concrete, never anything she could challenge directly, just a constant undercurrent of doubt that she didn't belong here. The other candidates had already taken their shots. Richardson, a former Army Ranger with 4 deployments, had missed by 6 inches. Torres, a SEAL team veteran, had clipped the edge of the target but not achieved a center mass hit. Even Callahan, who'd been shooting competitively since he was 12, had failed to compensate properly for the wind conditions. Now it was Maya's turn, and the weight of expectation pressed down like a physical force. She knew what they were thinking. If the experienced male operators couldn't make this shot, how could she possibly succeed? The doubt was palpable, hanging in the air like morning fog. Maya exhaled slowly, her finger finding the trigger with the familiarity of a handshake. She didn't think about the wind or the distance or the 24 pairs of eyes watching her. She thought about a hillside in Helmand Province, about Marines trapped under enemy fire, about the insurgent machine gunner who'd been slaughtering her brothers until she'd put a bullet through his heart at 900 meters in conditions twice as bad as this. Some shots you don't get to miss. The rifle spoke once, a sharp crack that echoed across the range. Through his binoculars, Brennan's expression shifted from smug anticipation to genuine shock. The bullet had struck dead center, a perfect shot that defied the conditions and probability. "Lucky hit," Brennan muttered, lowering his binoculars. But his voice carried uncertainty now, a crack in the armor of his conviction. Maya cleared her weapon and stepped back from the line, her face revealing nothing. She'd learned long ago that showing emotion in front of men like Brennan was a mistake. Give them nothing to grab onto, nothing to use against you. As she walked back to join the other candidates, she caught Richardson's respectful nod and Torres's look of genuine amazement. But she also saw Brennan conferring with the other instructors, their heads close together in urgent conversation. She'd seen that look before, that mixture of disbelief and something darker, something that looked uncomfortably like fear. That evening, Maya sat in the barracks cleaning her rifle with the methodical precision that had been drilled into her over 8 years of military service. Around her, the other candidates engaged in the usual post-training rituals. Some wrote letters home, others studied tactical manuals, a few played cards in the corner. The atmosphere was relaxed, almost collegiate, the camaraderie of people united by shared suffering. Richardson dropped onto the bench beside her, his own weapon disassembled on the table. "That shot today was incredible, Chen. Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" Maya ran a cleaning patch through the barrel, her movements automatic. "Practice!" "Come on," Richardson pressed. "Nobody shoots like that just from practice. You've got to have some secret, some technique." "No secret," Maya said quietly. "Just lots of trigger time." Torres joined them, curiosity evident on his face. "I heard you did 3 tours in Afghanistan. Where were you stationed?" "Around," Maya replied, her tone polite but clearly closing the conversation. She learned the hard way that talking about her deployment history led to questions she couldn't answer, assumptions she didn't want to encourage. Better to be the quiet professional, the grey woman who attracted no attention. But as she reassembled her rifle, her thumb brushed across the polymer stock, feeling the subtle marks beneath the military-grade finish. 29 careful notches, each one a life taken in defense of others. Each one a memory that played behind her eyes in the quiet moments before sleep. The insurgent commander who'd been planning a suicide bombing. The Taliban sniper who'd been killing villagers. The Al-Qaeda cell leader who'd been trafficking children. Every single one of them had needed to die so others could live. The barracks door crashed open at 1800 hours, interrupting the peaceful evening routine. Instructor Brennan stood in the doorway, his face carved from granite, flanked by 2 other staff members. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Chen, pack your gear. You're done." The words hit the barracks like a flashbang grenade. Maya looked up from her weapon, her hands steady despite the ice suddenly forming in her chest. Around her, 24 candidates froze in mid-motion, some with letters half-written, others with cards suspended in mid-play. The reality of their situation crashed down like a wave. If Chen was being dismissed, none of them were safe, sir. Maya's voice remained calm, but Richardson saw her knuckles whiten around the cleaning rod in her hand. Brennan held up an official-looking document, his face a professional mask. Administrative separation effective immediately. Failure to meet program standards. The silence that followed was absolute. Torres stared in open disbelief, his mind refusing to process what he'd just heard. Chen had never failed a single evaluation. She'd crushed the physical fitness tests, dominated the land navigation courses, excelled at close-quarters combat. She'd outperformed half the candidates in every measurable category. What standards, sir? The question came from Richardson before he could stop himself, his sense of justice overriding his survival instinct. Brennan's eyes snapped to him like a targeting laser. "You got something to say, candidate?" Richardson's jaw worked, a dozen arguments forming and dying on his tongue. Speaking up for a dismissed teammate was a fast track to joining them on the bus home. Everyone in the room knew it. Maya caught his eye and gave the slightest shake of her head. "Don't sacrifice yourself for me. Don't make this worse." "Thought so," Brennan said coldly. He turned back to Maya. "You have 2 hours to pack. Transport leaves at 2000 hours." As he left, the barracks erupted in whispers. Maya stood slowly, her face unreadable, though her mind raced through possibilities and implications. She knew better than to show weakness in front of men like Brennan. Knew that any emotional response would be used as retroactive justification for her dismissal. "Yes, sir," she said to the empty doorway. The next 90 minutes passed in a blur of controlled activity. Maya packed her gear with the same precision she applied to everything, each item folded and placed with military exactness. Her teammates watched, some offering quiet words of support, others simply shaking their heads in disbelief. "This is wrong, Chen," Torres said, helping her fold her poncho liner. "Everybody in this room knows it's wrong." "Doesn't matter now," Maya replied, her voice steady. She continued packing, refusing to let them see how deeply the dismissal cut. She'd proven herself 100 times over in combat, had earned her place through blood and sacrifice, and still it wasn't enough. Still, they found reasons to push her out. Richardson appeared with a duffel bag. "Need help with anything?" "I'm good," Maya said. She paused, looking around at the faces watching her. "You guys keep pushing. Don't let them break you." "They're not breaking us," Callahan said from across the room. "They're breaking themselves. Anyone with eyes can see that." At 19:30 hours, just as Maya was zipping her final bag, Instructor Hayes entered the barracks. Where Brennan was all sharp edges and cold authority, Hayes carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who'd seen real combat and understood its costs. He'd been running special operations training for 15 years, had deployed to every major conflict since Desert Storm, and had earned the respect of candidates and instructors alike. "Chen," he said, his voice neutral, "I need to inspect your gear before you depart." "Standard procedure." Maya nodded and laid out her equipment on her bunk with practiced efficiency. Boots, uniforms, body armor, tactical vest, personal items. Everything accounted for, everything in perfect order. Hayes moved through the inspection with professional thoroughness, checking each item against his inventory list. Finally, he picked up her M4 carbine, the weapon she'd been issued at the start of training and had used exclusively for the past 12 weeks. He examined it with the experienced eye of an armorer, checking the bolt carrier group, testing the trigger, inspecting the barrel. Then he turned it over, studying the stock. The clipboard slipped from his hands, clattering to the floor. The sound echoed in the sudden silence like a gunshot. Every candidate in the barracks turned to look. Hayes stood frozen, staring at the rifle stock like he'd just seen a ghost walk through the wall, carved into the polymer. Barely visible beneath layers of military paint but unmistakable once you knew to look for them, were 29 precise notches, each one clean and deliberate, the work of someone who'd taken the time to mark their weapon properly, each one representing a confirmed kill in combat. Hayes had seen notches like these before, but only on the weapons of the most elite snipers, the ones who'd spent years in the worst combat zones doing the hardest jobs. 29 kills wasn't just impressive. It was legendary. "Jesus Christ," Hayes whispered, the profanity shocking in its rarity from the normally composed instructor. The barracks fell into absolute silence. Everyone turned, sensing something significant had just happened, but not understanding what. Maya stood at attention beside her packed gear, her expression unchanged. She'd known this moment would come eventually. The notches weren't something she advertised, but she'd never tried to hide them either. They were part of her story, part of who she was. Hayes looked up from the rifle, meeting her eyes. His entire demeanor had shifted. He was no longer looking at a candidate who'd failed to meet standards. He was looking at a warrior who'd already proven everything that mattered in the only place where it truly counted. "Chen," he said, and the respect in his voice was unmistakable. "Where did you serve?" "Afghanistan, sir." 4 tours. What unit?" "1st Battalion, 5th Marines." "Scout Sniper Platoon." The words hung in the air like a revelation. Richardson's mouth fell open. Torres whispered something that might have been a prayer. Callahan simply stared, his worldview suddenly tilting on its axis. Hayes had heard stories about a female Marine sniper in Afghanistan, whispered legends that circulated among the special operations community. The Angel of Helmand, they'd called her. A ghost who appeared when Marines were in trouble, who took impossible shots from impossible distances, who'd held the line when everyone else was falling back. He'd always assumed the stories were exaggerated, the usual combat myths that grew in the telling. Now he was holding her rifle. "Brennan!" Hayes shouted, his voice carrying an urgency that made everyone in the barracks snap to attention. "Get here now!" Footsteps pounded across the compound as Brennan responded to the tone in Hayes's voice. He burst through the door expecting some kind of emergency, but instead found Hayes holding a rifle and staring at Chen like she'd just revealed herself to be the Terminator. "What's the problem, Hayes?" Brennan asked impatiently. Hayes held up the rifle, pointing to the stock. "Count them!" Brennan squinted at the markings, his expression shifting from annoyance to confusion to dawning comprehension. His face went through several colors, settling on a sickly pale that suggested he'd just realized he'd made a catastrophic mistake. "Holy Mother of God," Brennan finally managed, his voice barely a whisper. The two instructors stood frozen, staring at Maya with the expression of men who'd just discovered they'd been swimming in water full of sharks. The swagger that usually defined Brennan had completely evaporated, replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like fear. "Ma'am," Hayes said, and the word "ma'am" from an instructor to a candidate sent shockwaves through every person in the room. The formality wasn't just unusual, it was revolutionary. It signaled that the power dynamic had fundamentally shifted. "We need to make some phone calls." Within 20 minutes of Hayes' discovery, the base transformed into a hive of frantic activity. Brennan had disappeared immediately after seeing the rifle, his face ashen and his usual confidence completely absent. Hayes remained in the barracks, standing guard over Maya's gear like he was protecting evidence at a crime scene. The other candidates sat in stunned silence, pieces of a puzzle suddenly falling into place. "Nobody moves, nobody talks," Hayes commanded, his voice carrying an authority that broke no argument. "This information stays in this room until further notice." "That's an order!" Maya continued her packing with the same methodical precision, though she could feel 24 pairs of eyes boring into her back. She'd always known this day might come, had always understood that her combat record would eventually catch up with her. She just hoped to make it through the program first, to prove herself on merit alone without the weight of her past achievements influencing the outcome. Torres finally broke the silence with a whispered question that everyone was thinking. "Chen, how many enemy fighters did you actually take out?" She paused, a folded shirt in her hands, her back still to the group. "The number doesn't matter. What matters is that every shot protected American lives. Every engagement saved brothers and sisters who would have died otherwise. But 29 confirmed kills," Richardson breathed. "That's not just good. That's historic." Maya turned to face them, her expression serious. "It's not something to celebrate. Every one of those marks represents someone who died. Sometimes I see their faces in my dreams. I remember the weight of each decision, the responsibility of each shot. It's not a game. It's not a competition. It's the worst part of war, and I carry it with me every single day." The sobering words silenced any further questions. These were experienced operators, men who'd seen combat themselves, and they recognized the truth in her words. The notches weren't trophies. They were scars. Hayes made his first phone call to Lieutenant Colonel Davidson, the base commander who oversaw all special operations training. The second was to the base psychiatrist, Dr. Sarah Morrison, who specialized in combat trauma assessment and had clearance to review classified deployment records. The third was to the personnel office, requesting an immediate pull of Staff Sergeant Maya Chen's complete military file, including all classified portions. By 1945 hours, Davidson's office had become an impromptu command center. The colonel paced behind his desk like a caged predator, his normally composed demeanor cracking under the weight of what he was hearing. "Tell me again exactly what you saw," Davidson demanded. Hayes stood at attention, his voice steady. 29 notches carved into her personal weapon, sir. Clean, deliberate marks. I recognized them immediately. Only combat snipers with confirmed kills mark their weapons like that, and only the best ones live long enough to accumulate that many. Davidson stopped pacing. In his 22 years of command, he'd overseen thousands of candidates. Some were former Rangers with multiple deployments. Some were Delta Force operators, transitioning between units. Some were Navy SEALs with impressive combat records. But a Marine Scout sniper with 29 confirmed kills, that was a different category entirely. That was the kind of operator who became legend, and we dismissed her for what reason exactly? Davidson's voice was dangerously quiet. Brennan, who'd been summoned to the office, swallowed hard. "Unit cohesion concerns, sir. Questions about her ability to integrate with the team." "The usual standards, Davidson repeated coldly. "Give me her file, now." While Brennan scrambled to contact the records office, Dr. Morrison arrived with a thick folder under her arm. She'd worked with enough combat veterans to recognize the significance of what they'd discovered, had counseled enough operators to understand the psychological weight of 29 kills. "Colonel," she said, spreading Elena's psychological evaluations across his desk. "I pulled what I could from the medical database before the classified file arrives. This woman has been through experiences that would break most people." Davidson leaned over the desk, scanning the documents. 4 tours in Afghanistan, 3 Bronze Stars, 1 with V device for valor. Purple Heart, Navy Cross recommendation pending. 18 consecutive hours providing sniper overwatch under enemy fire. Multiple confirmed engagements at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. 0 psychiatric red flags. 0 disciplinary issues. Perfect fitness scores across the board. And Brennan thought she lacked what exactly? Davidson asked, his voice dripping with barely controlled anger. The classified file arrived 15 minutes later, delivered by a courier who'd driven from Fort Liberty with lights and sirens. Davidson opened it with steady hands, though his jaw tightened with each page he read. The file told a story that went far beyond simple statistics. It detailed operations that were still classified, missions that had saved countless American lives, engagements that had turned the tide in some of the fiercest battles of the Afghanistan War. Maya Chen wasn't just a decorated soldier. She was a genuine war hero whose exploits had become legend in the Marine Corps. "Jesus Christ," Davidson muttered, reading about an operation in Helmand Province where Maya had single-handedly held off an enemy assault for 6 hours while her unit evacuated wounded. "This woman is the real deal," Dr. Morrison nodded. "MIT graduate before enlisting. IQ testing off the charts. No PTSD markers despite extensive combat exposure. Psychological resilience in the 99th percentile. She's not just physically capable, Colonel. She's one of the most mentally tough individuals I've ever evaluated." Davidson checked his watch. 1955. The transport was scheduled to leave in 5 minutes. "Brennan," he said, his voice cold enough to frost glass. "Stop that bus." Right now, Brennan fumbled for his radio. "Transport 7, this is base operations. Return to compound immediately. Cancel departure." "Repeat, cancel departure." The radio crackled. "Transport 7 copies. Returning to compound." In the bus, Maya sat in the back row with her gear piled beside her, staring out the window at the passing North Carolina landscape. She'd been watching the pine trees slide past, trying not to think about the years of training and sacrifice that had just been thrown away. When the bus suddenly slowed and began turning around, the driver's voice came over the intercom. "Change of plans, Sergeant Chen. We're heading back to base." Maya felt her stomach tighten. Being recalled couldn't be good. Whatever was happening, it meant more scrutiny, more questions, possibly even an investigation into her service record. She'd seen enough military politics to know that when things went wrong, they usually got worse before they got better. 20 minutes later, she stood at attention in Colonel Davidson's office, her packed duffel at her feet, facing a room full of senior officers and staff. The atmosphere was tense, charged with an electricity she couldn't quite identify. Davidson sat behind his desk, her personnel files spread before him like evidence at a trial. Brennan stood against the wall, his face carefully neutral, but his posture defensive. He stood at ease near the door, his expression unreadable. "Staff Sergeant Chen," Davidson began, his voice formal. "Why didn't you inform us about the extent of your combat record when you applied to this program?" Maya kept her eyes forward, her voice steady. "Sir, I believed I should be evaluated on current performance, not past achievements. I wanted to earn my place here based on what I could do now, not what I'd done before." Davidson leaned back in his chair, studying her with the intense focus of a man reassessing everything he thought he knew. 29 confirmed kills, 3 Bronze Stars, Purple Heart, Navy Cross recommendation, 4 combat tours in some of the worst areas of Afghanistan. And you thought we didn't need to know this? Sir, with respect, my record shouldn't matter. What should matter is whether I can meet the standards of this program. Every candidate here has a combat record. I didn't want special treatment. Special treatment, Davidson repeated slowly. He stood and walked around his desk, stopping directly in front of her. Sergeant Chen, do you understand what you are? Maya remained at attention, confused by the question. Sir? You're a legend, Davidson said bluntly. The Angel of Helmand. We've all heard the stories. The Marine sniper who held impossible positions, who took impossible shots, who appeared when units were in trouble and turned the tide of battles. We thought the stories were exaggerated. We thought no one could actually be that good. He picked up a document from his desk. This is an after-action report from Operation Steel Resolve. It describes how a single Marine sniper provided overwatch for an entire company during a Taliban assault, eliminating 36 enemy combatants over 18 hours and preventing the position from being overrun. That sniper was you. Maya said nothing, remembering that day with crystal clarity. The heat and dust, the endless waves of attackers, the desperate radio calls for ammunition, the weight of knowing that if she failed, everyone in that compound would die. Davidson continued. This is a commendation from the Commanding General of Marine Forces Central Command. It describes your actions as, quote, among the finest examples of Marine Corps marksmanship and dedication to duty in the history of modern warfare, end quote. He set the document down and met her eyes. We made a mistake, Sergeant Chen, a significant, embarrassing mistake. I'm offering you immediate reinstatement to the program with full honors and a formal apology for your wrongful dismissal. Maya stood perfectly still, her mind processing this unexpected turn. Part of her wanted to accept immediately, to grab this second chance and prove herself all over again. But another part, the part that had learned hard lessons about military politics and institutional bias, hesitated. Sir, she said carefully, what's changed? This morning I was unsuitable for the program. Tonight you want me back. The only difference is that you know my combat record. My skills haven't changed. My performance hasn't changed. Only your knowledge has changed. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Davidson had the grace to look uncomfortable. You're right, he admitted. Your dismissal was based on factors that had nothing to do with your actual performance. That's on us. That's on me as the commander responsible for maintaining standards. I can't undo the mistake, but I can correct it. Maya considered this. She could refuse, could walk away, and let them live with their error. But that would mean giving up on something she'd worked years to achieve. It would mean letting bias win. I'll accept reinstatement, she said finally. On one condition. Davidson raised an eyebrow. What condition? Review and standardize the evaluation criteria for this program. Future candidates should be assessed solely on performance and demonstrated capability, not on assumptions about who does or doesn't belong in special operations. What happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone else. Davidson smiled, a genuine expression of respect. Agreed. Dr. Morrison will lead the review and will implement changes within 60 days. You have my word. They shook hands, the gesture carrying the weight of mutual understanding between soldiers who'd both seen too much to waste time on nonsense. Welcome back, Sergeant Chen, Davidson said. This time, everyone will know exactly who they're training alongside. The next morning at 0400 hours, the entire candidate formation stood at attention in the pre-dawn darkness. Word had spread through unofficial channels that something significant was about to happen, but nobody knew exactly what. Maya stood in her usual position, third row center, her face giving nothing away, despite the butterflies in her stomach. Colonel Davidson stood before them, flanked by Instructor Hayes and a notably absent Instructor Brennan. The base lights cast long shadows across the parade ground, and the morning air carried the smell of pine and anticipation. Yesterday, we made an error, Davidson began, his voice carrying across the formation with command authority. Today we correct it. More importantly, we learn from it. He gestured to Hayes, who stepped forward holding a file folder. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen, Hayes read, his voice clear and respectful. 4 combat tours in Afghanistan. 29 confirmed kills in defense of American forces. 3 Bronze Stars with V device for valor. Purple Heart, Navy Cross recommendation. Multiple commendations for actions under fire that saved countless American lives. The formation remained silent, but Maya could feel the shift in energy around her. Shock, respect, disbelief, all rolling through the ranks like a wave. Davidson stepped forward again. The Angel of Helmand, when Marines were pinned down and dying, when the enemy thought they had our people trapped, she was the intervention that turned the tide. She was the reason brothers and sisters came home to their families. He paused, letting the words sink in. Staff Sergeant Chen applied to this program like any other candidate. She didn't ask for special treatment. She didn't demand recognition. She simply wanted to be evaluated on her current performance. And we failed her. We failed to see excellence standing right in front of us because we were looking through the lens of our own assumptions. Torres whispered something that sounded like amazement. Richardson stood straighter, pride evident in his posture. Even the instructors who'd questioned Maya's place in the program looked uncomfortable, realizing they'd been blind to what was obvious in hindsight. Effective immediately, Davidson continued. Staff Sergeant Chen is reinstated to the program with full honors. Additionally, she will be conducting advanced marksmanship training for all candidates, sharing the combat-proven techniques that kept her alive and brought her teammates home. Maya felt her heart rate increase. This wasn't what she'd expected. She'd thought reinstatement would mean quietly returning to training, blending back into the group. Instead, Davidson was putting her front and center, making her experience the foundation for everyone's education. Chen, front and center, Davidson ordered. Maya marched forward, her movements crisp and professional. She halted before the colonel and rendered a perfect salute. The floor is yours, Sergeant, Davidson said quietly. Show them what real combat shooting looks like. 3 hours later, Maya stood on the advanced range, with 24 candidates arrayed before her. The initial awkwardness had faded, replaced by genuine curiosity and respect. These were professionals, operators who understood that combat experience was the most valuable currency in their world. Combat shooting is nothing like range shooting, Maya began, her voice carrying the authority of hard-won experience. On the range, targets don't shoot back. They don't move. They're not trying to kill you and everyone you care about. Real combat is chaos. It's fear. It's making impossible shots under impossible conditions while people are depending on you to keep them alive. She demonstrated techniques that no manual could teach. Shooting while moving, engaging multiple targets in rapid succession, compensating for wind, elevation, and adrenaline, making split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. Richardson raised his hand. How do you handle the pressure? Knowing that if you miss, someone dies? Maya paused, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. You train until the fundamentals become automatic. Breathing, trigger control, sight picture. When the moment comes, your body knows what to do. But more importantly, you remember why you're doing it. Every shot I took in combat was to protect someone else. That's not pressure. That's purpose, Torres asked the harder question. How do you live with it afterward? The killing? The range fell silent. This was the question everyone wanted answered, but few had the courage to ask. Maya met his eyes directly. You remember why you did it? Every life I took was to save other lives. That's the burden we carry as operators. We do the hard things so others don't have to. We make the impossible choices in the impossible moments. And yes, it stays with you. Yes, you see faces in your dreams. But you also see the faces of the people who came home because of what you did. You hold on to that. You remember that your actions had meaning and purpose. She gestured to her rifle. These marks aren't trophies. They're reminders. Reminders that every shot matters. Every decision has weight. Every moment of hesitation could mean someone else's death. I carry them, so I never forget what combat actually costs. The training continued through the day, Maya sharing not just techniques but the mindset that had kept her alive through 4 tours. She taught them about patience, about reading terrain, about understanding enemy patterns. She taught them about fear management and decision-making under fire. Most importantly, she taught them about responsibility. As the sun began to set over Fort Bragg, Davidson watched from the observation tower. Dr. Morrison stood beside him, making notes for her evaluation review. "She's a natural teacher," Morrison observed. "The candidates are absorbing everything she says." Davidson nodded. "Because they know she's earned the right to teach them. Every word comes from real experience, real consequences. You can't fake that kind of credibility. The evaluation changes you requested," Morrison said. "I've drafted new criteria focusing exclusively on performance metrics. Gender, background, assumptions, none of it factors into the assessment anymore. Just capability and demonstrated skill." "Good," Davidson said. "This program should produce the best operators possible, regardless of who they are or where they come from. We almost lost someone exceptional because we couldn't see past our own biases. That doesn't happen again." 6 months later, graduation day arrived with the crisp formality that defined military ceremonies. Of the original 25 candidates, 19 stood in formation, waiting to receive their certificates. The training had been brutal, the standards unforgiving, but those who remained had earned their place through demonstrated excellence. Maya stood in formation as Colonel Davidson called names one by one. When her turn came, she marched forward with the same precision she brought to everything. "Staff Sergeant Maya Chen," Davidson announced. "Graduate with highest honors. Top scores in marksmanship, land navigation, close quarters combat, and tactical leadership. Additionally, awarded the Distinguished Training Graduate Award for exceptional contribution to program excellence." As she accepted her certificate, Davidson leaned in close. "The Angel of Helmand showed us all what real excellence looks like," he said quietly. "You've changed this program for the better. Thank you for your service and your example." Maya rendered a crisp salute. "Sir, thank you for the opportunity to serve alongside the best." In the audience, a group of senior officers watched with interest. Among them was a 3-star general who'd been following Maya's progress closely. As the ceremony concluded, he approached Davidson with a purpose. "That's quite an operator you've got there, Colonel." "Yes, sir. One of the finest I've ever seen. We've been watching her file. We have an assignment that requires someone with her unique skill set and experience. Would she be interested in a new challenge?" Davidson smiled. "Sir, with respect, you'll have to ask her yourself. She's earned the right to choose her own path." Across the parade ground, Maya stood surrounded by her fellow graduates. Richardson clapped her on the shoulder. Torres shook her hand with genuine respect. Even the instructors who'd initially doubted her now treated her as an equal, a fellow professional who'd proven herself beyond any question. A young woman in army uniform approached hesitantly, clearly working up courage. She couldn't have been more than 22, fresh-faced and determined. "Sergeant Chen, I'm Private First Class Andrea Martinez. I just wanted to say, you're the reason I enlisted. I heard the stories about the Angel of Helmand, and I thought if she can do it, maybe I can too." Maya looked at the young woman, seeing herself years earlier, full of determination and dreams. "You can do more than you think, Private. Don't let anyone tell you different. And remember, it's not about being better than anyone else. It's about being the best version of yourself." Martinez nodded eagerly, stars in her eyes. "I'm going to try out for this program next year. I want to be like you." "Don't be like me," Maya said gently. "Be better. Learn from my mistakes. Push further than I did. That's how we move forward." As families rushed forward to congratulate graduates, Maya stood quietly, looking at the North Carolina landscape that had tested and ultimately strengthened her. She'd come here as a Marine seeking a new challenge. She was leaving as something more, a symbol that excellence transcends expectations, that courage comes in many forms, and that the best operators are often the ones we least expect. The Angel of Helmand had found her wings again, and this time she was ready to soar higher than ever before.